we found these sort of payroll-only sponsorships and fake jobs being offered in a range of sectors. So it was IT, hospitality, finance, graphic design. And in many cases, they were like senior level roles. They were pitched as senior level roles, but yeah, obviously don't exist.
Now, a Times investigation has exposed how criminal networks are targeting migrants at risk of deportation and offering to arrange skilled worker visas for jobs that don't exist. The deals, which are being sold for £20,000, enable people to get visas by presenting sponsorship certificates issued by real Home Office approved companies that falsely claim they are being hired in skilled or shortage roles. Shanti, senior investigations reporter at The Times, has broken this story and is with me now. How did you uncover this?
So we spent quite a lot of time going through Facebook groups where people seeking UK visas look for advice. And we found a lot of posts from agents and others who were offering to arrange this sponsorship. So there were lots of posts that offered sponsorship with real jobs, but there were others that said explicitly that they were payroll only or that they were without work. And the arrangements basically involve documents being issued, which are called certificates of sponsorship. And they say on paper that the person is being hired in a real job. And those documents are then used to apply to the Home Office for a visa.
Which areas are most affected? Which sort of job sectors are most affected?
So when we're talking about the types of people who ended up turning to this black market, we found that it was in many cases people who had come to the UK legally, often as care workers or in other skilled jobs, and then they'd lost that sponsorship, so they were looking for other roles. We found these sort of payroll-only sponsorships and fake jobs being offered in a range of sectors. So it was IT, hospitality, finance, graphic design. And in many cases, they were like senior level roles. They were pitched as senior level roles, but yeah, obviously don't exist.
Right. I mean, the job shortage list, if you like, it was very extensive. It's been sort of subsequently reduced since Boris Johnson was Prime Minister and this Labour government. Has that made it more difficult?
Yeah, so I think there are several things that have made it more difficult for people to find jobs legitimately. If you came to the UK and you had a sponsored job and you then lose it, you have 60 days to find another sponsor or leave the country. And we heard from people who had really struggled to find alternate sponsors, because either, because of this tightening of the rules, which means there are far fewer jobs available for skilled workers now, but also because the Home Office has increased its compliance against companies. So it's removing licenses from companies. And when a company gets its license taken away, all the workers linked to that company also kind of get told that they then have 60 days to find a new role. So there's a lot of demand for jobs at the same time as people are just finding it really difficult. I
mean, has the government responded by saying they're going to look into this now as a result of the investigation?
Yeah, so the Home Office said that they're investigating the activity, and then we've sort of I understand that there are inquiries underway to try and get to the bottom of some of the cases that we've highlighted and to see whether they sort of want to take any further action. We're also, we also spoke to Facebook that a big part of the trade is on these public groups where agents very openly advertise, in some cases, these sponsorships. So there are kind of questions for Facebook, I think, as well as the government.
What about the scale of it? I mean, are we talking about huge numbers here or relatively small?
I think in the grand scheme of things, it's really difficult to say exactly how many fraudulent sponsorships have been offered or arranged. The experts we spoke to said that, the vast majority of skilled workers are, being hired legitimately. But our investigation showed that, these fraudulent sponsorships are being advertised quite openly. So we joined over 4 months, 13 Facebook groups with almost 1 million members combined. Okay. And we found lots of posts where sponsorship was being offered for both real jobs and fake ones, and more than 250 examples of sponsorships that were kind of explicitly labelled as...
Right, so reasonably significant then.
I think so, potentially.
Shanti Das, thank you very much for joining us, Senior Investigations Reporter at The Times, with that story. Let's talk to Kevin Foster, Junior Immigration Minister under Boris Johnson, who brought in, or certainly helped bring in, the Skilled Worker Scheme. Welcome to Times at 1, Kevin Foster.
Hello, Joe. Hi.
Hi. Now, let's just remind everyone, all our listeners, about the political backdrop to this, because the net migration figures under Boris Johnson reached unprecedented record highs during and immediately after his premiership, peaking at something like 945,000 in the year ending March 2023. Is that a record you're proud of?
Well, let's start, Joe, with the fact that some of the figures you've given there include things like the Ukraine visa system and the Hong Kong visa,
Yes.
rather than just skilled worker. It's also worth noting, and I've spoken about this before, that in 2022 there were plans to, with the pandemic period coming to an end, to revise some of the salary thresholds, also to look at ending things like the shortage occupation list discount that existed at that time. Those changes sadly did not go ahead, and you'd have to have Mr. Sunak on and perhaps Suella Braverman on to ask why those did not occur. And then you saw the peaks in the early part of 2023.
So it is a record you're proud.
Quoted.
It's a record you're proud of for the reasons that you have set out. That super high level of net migration, and just to remind listeners that that is the number of people coming into the country minus the number leaving.
Again, Joe, let's look at what happened when some of the changes we were going to be doing in 2022 without a leadership change then were implemented in April 2024. It's actually pretty unarguable that the changes, actually, my good colleague then, Tom Pursglove, introduced under James Cleverly in the early part of 24 were actually very significant in terms of reducing the number of skilled worker visas being issued, the removal of a discount for shortage occupation list, the increasing of the salary threshold. Most of the salary increase was actually at that period, and a lot of that's then attributed for the reduction in skilled worker visas that followed. To be fair, the current government's taken it further. Some of those things I wouldn't object to, but it is worth noting some of that change. But you'd have to have Mr. Sunak on and perhaps Suella on to explain why those changes weren't made.
Well, we've got you, so we'll stick with you, Kevin, for the moment. And you're right, it is about timing, because there's a lag quite often between policies being brought in and then the subsequent sort of metrics or stats that we look at. I mean, the Times investigation that we were just talking about indicates that the fall in skilled roles available is helping fuel a black market for sponsorship and leading some migrants who arrived in the so-called Boris wave to turn to fraudulent options. What's your view?
Well, first, there's always a potential for corruption in any system. People may remember back the old Tier 4 student visa about 17, 18 years ago, where the then Home Secretary, Theresa May, ended up shutting down about 800 colleges who were suspected of selling immigration status rather than an educational achievement. So there's always that potential there. Yes, inevitably, the rules being tighter means people who perhaps lose their jobs or their sponsorship comes to an end for whatever reason will find it harder to transfer into a role. But to be fair to the government, that isn't an argument against tightening up the rules.
So you do actually
enforcing the rules and dealing with corruption.
Right. So you do welcome the tightening of the skilled worker category, and that it was the right move, which sort of indicates that it was far too big and far too broad, perhaps when you were overseeing it. I mean, now looking back, what were the flaws in the system that you helped carve out, if you look at it now?
First of all, Joan, in this interview, I already said one of the issues was you shouldn't have the thresholds set in stone for all time. So the salary thresholds were due to be updated in 2020. The salary thresholds are quite a big part of the skilled worker visa because they set the minimum amount that someone can be paid. And effectively, that acts as a big, if I can put it this way, restriction on how many people genuinely want to employ someone via it, given how much they'll be having to pay in exchange. Those were due in 2022. Again, we've already covered leadership change meant they didn't go ahead. Also, in terms of reacting quickly to potential areas of abuse, any government has to look at it in terms of its migration system. Student visas back in the early 2010s were a big area of it. We also saw the issue with dependents linked to a graduate visa and linked to postgraduate study, where, again, that's prompted a surge of applications, which again, was actually Robert Jenrick who removed the ability to bring a dependent to shut that down. So any government will always need to be be conscious that people will be looking to try and game the system. We see that in asylum. You'll see that in things like skilled worker and student worker visa, and then react accordingly and quickly.
I mean, would you have ever looked at ID cards? I mean, the Prime Minister obviously posited it and then U-turned on it, because that was used as one way of trying to prevent people coming to the UK, yes, maybe legally initially, and then slipping into the black market.
Yeah, ID cards are pretty useless in terms of the issue we're talking about now, and I've spoken numerous times before. First, if someone's, by the way, gaming the system and looking to come as a legal migrant, having to show an ID card isn't going to stop them jumping off a boat at Dover. The second part, and what we're talking about with skilled worker here, is you actually have to prove your identity. Employers have to perform employment checks already. You can't just employ someone without any ID. Clearly, if someone's doing this corruptly and they're ignoring other pieces of law and actually doing things that clearly carry significant prison sentences in terms of outright fraud, then they're not going to be deterred by the requirement to check a digital ID card. So no, we never looked at ID card. We couldn't see what benefit it was possibly going to have, given there's already requirements to check identity and status. And if you're ignoring those, you're going to ignore the requirement to do an ID card as well.
Right. What about sanctions? You sort of talked about the things that might be suggested. Tougher sanctions for people organising these sorts of deals or fake certificates?
Yeah, certainly. I think what the Times has uncovered is clear criminal behaviour. People are fundamentally lying to the Home Office about sponsoring someone in a genuine job. So alongside the administrative penalties, such as revocation of their sponsor licence and those involved be having their status removed and then potentially deported from the country, we all know the issues the government faces with removing people from the country, even when they've behaved in this way. But again, that's the obvious sanction for those directly involved. In addition to those who clearly lied and taken bribes to do so, facing prosecution for fraud offences.
Kevin, you will know now that the net migration figure is 204,000, or the most recent one anyway, in the year ending June 2025. Are you surprised by how much it's fallen?
Not particularly. First, remember, back in 2022, you had the surge after the Ukraine war and the Ukraine schemes happening. Ditto Hong Kong scheme. Many of those who were going to come from Hong Kong have now come. And obviously, the situation in Ukraine is very different today to what it was back in 2022. In terms of, though, seeing the tightening of the skilled worker visa, it's no surprise those numbers have fallen significantly. There'll be debate. Should some of the changes made in April 24 be done earlier? Yes, as I've touched on, some of them were planned in 2022, but not taken forward at that time. So it's not a surprise the numbers are coming down. Obviously, where the government still faces a big challenge is on enforcing the migration system, particularly at Dover.